So let's switch gears a little bit. Recent data from the CDC shows that in 2023, e-cigarettes were the most used tobacco product among middle and high school students in the United States. This means that during 2023, 2.1 million, or 7.7% of students, currently used e-cigarettes. This includes about 4.6% of middle school students and 10% of high school students. And among students who had ever used e-cigarettes, close to 50% reported current e-cigarette use among students who currently use e-cigarette use. 25% use an e-cigarette every day. Now, based on what you see in your practices, are you surprised by these numbers, or do you find that there is continued presence of misinformation around the health risks of vaping among the students, and for that matter, among their parents as well? And how do you address this in your practices?
I think it's epidemic. And I definitely believe that as physicians, every single day we're fighting this misinformation. At the American Lung Association, I cannot tell you how many parents I say, and I give them the website on the TikTok, because it's so important for them to talk to their kids about vaping before they even get to seventh and eighth grade, because they're starting younger and younger. They found stocks of e-cigarettes in bathrooms in middle schools and high schools. So if we don't start talking to the kids early on, then they won't know what the dangers are. So it really is talking to the parents, talking to the kids in here. And actually, some parents have brought the kids into clinic here who are vaping and said, Dr. Mora, their asthma has been off. They started vaping. I need you to talk to them. And so it's really having that conversation. I had one teenager who actually was intubated with an asthma exacerbation secondary to when he started vaping. And so it really scared him. And now I tell that story to my other teenagers that I have here, and I tell them about these dangers. And I'm sure Dr. Sadreameli also has similar stories about the dangers of vaping.
Yeah, so vaping and talking about vaping and getting the word out to our youth is something that I'm really passionate about, and something that I've really enjoyed partnering with the Association with over the years, because I have seen it in my practice. I continue to see people vaping in my practice, and I see the pulmonary harms as well. And that's just the people who are young and doing it and are already exhibiting the symptoms of the harms. Some people may not realize they're harming their lungs until they're a bit older. So the bottom line is there's so much misinformation out there about vaping and e-cigarette use. We know that, unfortunately, use is very common among youth. And even though the rates have varied over the past few years, we've had some ups and downs. It is still way too high. And it's really a sad story, because we were really winning, the battle against tobacco, big tobacco, with our youth. And then e-cigarettes just happened to come on the scene and, appear to be creating a whole new generation of problems, literally and figuratively. So I think of it this way. They are harmful to the lungs, e-cigarettes. We know that flavors are a big driver and attractor for youth. Many of the products that youth are using are not approved. They've not undergone FDA review. Many of them are on the market illegally. In fact, the most popular things, which are flavored devices, most of them have not, been given permission to be on the market. So that bothers me. I think it's really hard the cat's out of the bag, and it's hard to get it under control. And meanwhile, our youth that are using these products are getting addicted very quickly. So some of the harms I've seen in my practice in terms of pulmonary harms, I consider addiction to be a harm, induced by using an e-cigarette. And many of the devices, these pod-based devices that are very popular with youth, often the flavored ones, they're extremely addictive. They have very high levels of nicotine. So that's one harm right there, because you're looking at the risk of a lifelong addiction. And also, changing brain chemistry at a too young of an age, when the brain is still vulnerable to that. I'm thinking of preteens and teens. And then, we see both really acute harm. So similar to what Dr. Mora mentioned, E-Valley is the e-cigarette or vaping-associated lung injury. We obviously had a big rash of those happening in I try to remember my years. I think it was the fall of 2019, late summer of 2019. Well, even though we're not seeing it that high of a level, we're still seeing it. I've treated someone with E-Valley this summer who was previously healthy, and that patient got sick extremely quickly, extremely sick. And thank goodness is doing better now, and has stopped using products. But I also see people either with or without a previous history of asthma who are either developing new or worsening symptoms that are asthma-like, and really tend to not get much better until they stop using the product. So I could go on about this. I've probably said too much already, but I
No,
think
no, this is great. And as you both
prevention
know, you
that
mentioned
is
the
important, and just helping our youth understand, why they're harmful and that they're harmful. That's all stuff that I'm very focused on.
and I think you both mentioned the vape talk for parents
Yeah.
and preschools, both of which can be accessed on the Lung Association website. So I think Dr. Moore touched on this a little bit earlier, but as we send our children back to school, routine vaccinations need to be talked about. What kind of topic do you bring up, and especially with the recent advent of more vaccines being administered, misinformation around vaccines? How do you begin the discussion both with the parents and with their children about vaccinations?
Well, one of the things we know is that we saw a decrease in immunization rates in children after the pandemic. And the reason is because through the pandemic, a lot of pediatricians' offices were closed for routine immunizations. So these kids weren't taken. So then we had a lag. And when they looked at on a national level, what the rate of vaccinations pre-pandemic was, which was about 96% for pediatrics, CDC, we dropped to 80% of immunization rate at post-pandemic, which means we started lagging in immunizations to actual diseases that were already eradicated, like the measles. We saw measles outbursts throughout the US. We also saw cases of whooping cough, which we hadn't seen for a long time either. And we also saw some polio cases, which we had not seen for years. So this prompts a conversation as I see lots of families with multiple kids, different ages, and I tell them, have they set up their actual visit with the pediatrician? Are the kids up to date with vaccinations? Because this is so important. And if there's any doubt that the parents have, especially because there was a lot of misinformation around the COVID-19 vaccines, then parents then kind of got fearful, I think, a little about giving just routine vaccinations to their kids. So it's bringing this conversation back to the safety level where we're saying, okay, benefits outweigh the risks. Vaccines at the end of the day save lives. We've seen diseases completely eradicated. We want to keep them this way. So let's actually get you into your pediatrician, play catch up if there's actual shots that need administered. And of course, I also use this space to really, really talk about the flu vaccine and COVID-19 vaccine. So I'm getting mine. They're ordered. I get them at the end of August, and families are already scheduling for flu vaccines in the office. I had a mom who scheduled 3 kids and herself for flu vaccines at the beginning of September today. So it really prompts this conversation that we need to have with our patients.
Great, great.
Yeah, and I think things like flu vaccination, COVID vaccination, these annual vaccines, they're extra important for our patients with asthma. And for we've known for a long time that getting your flu shot each year can reduce the risk of hospitalization. We actually recommend this for all people and for all kids. But if someone has asthma, they're even more at risk for a hospitalization from flu or COVID. Actually, flu. I mean, we've really seen some really bad stuff over the years. So I try to share those experiences with families, and hopefully it helps. I have worked with some families who are scared to do these vaccinations, and then through working together and shared decision making, they were able to do it. And for some of these families, it's become an annual tradition, and then they're able to break through that. So we continue to try to support families as best we can.